There is a strange clarity that comes over you when the monitor beside your hospital bed is the only thing proving you are still alive. You hear the steady rhythmic beeping, and you realize how fragile everything is. At 60 years old, I found myself staring at a white ceiling, an oxygen tube in my nose, and an ache in my chest that felt like someone had parked a heavy truck directly on my ribs. I had survived a massive heart attack, but survival, as I quickly learned, comes with a price tag. I am Walter Beaumont, and that night changed everything. I am 65 years old now, living a life I could never have imagined back in Columbus, Ohio. But to understand how I ended up halfway across the world, you have to understand the life that almost killed me. Dun dun. Nunt. For 28 years, I worked as a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning technician. I spent my days crawling through dusty attics in the sweltering heat of summer and shivering in freezing basements during the brutal Ohio winters. It was hard, honest labor. I built a life on that work. I raised my son Patrick and my daughter Renee. My ex-wife Linda and I managed to keep the lights on and food on the table, but the stress of making ends meet was a constant companion. Over those 28 years, my body absorbed the toll. My knees ached, my back was constantly stiff, and the pressure in my chest was something I learned to ignore. I drank too much coffee, ate terrible food on the road, and never slept more than a handful of hours. I thought I was being a good provider, but in reality, I was slowly suffocating under the weight of the American dream. And on the physical toll of the HVAC profession is something few people understand until they are in it. You spend half your life contorted in spaces never meant for a human body. I remember days when the attic temperatures exceeded 130 degrees. I would emerge drenched in sweat, gasping for air, my heart pounding erratically against my ribs. I ignored the warning signs because that is what men in my trade do. We push through. We take an over-the-counter painkiller and we keep going. The numbness in my left arm, a pinched nerve, I told myself. The shortness of breath, just getting older. The denial is a powerful shield, right up until the moment it shatters completely. The night of the heart attack began like any other. I was sitting in my worn-out recliner, watching a late-night television show, trying to massage the tension out of my left shoulder. It started as a dull ache, then escalated into a crushing weight. The room spun. The pain shot down my arm and up into my jaw. The next thing I knew, paramedics were lifting me onto a stretcher, their voices a blur of urgent commands. I remember the flashing lights of the ambulance reflecting off the wet pavement, the terrifying realization that this might be the end. When I finally woke up in the intensive care unit, I was grateful for every painful breath, but that gratitude was short-lived. Few days later, the hospital billing department handed me a piece of paper that nearly stopped my heart a second time. I was looking at $80,000 in medical debt. $80,000 for 28 years of breaking my back. This was my reward. My insurance covered a fraction of the cost, leaving me responsible for an amount I could never hope to pay. I was 60 years old. My body was broken and I was financially ruined. I still keep the hospital bracelet from that night in my wallet, a constant reminder of the moment my old life ended. I went home to a mountain of bills and a handful of prescriptions I could not afford. none $80,000. The number echoed in my head like a death sentence. To someone with wealth, perhaps it is a manageable sum. But to a working-class man surviving on a fixed income, it is a mountain with no summit. I spent days calling the hospital billing department, pleading with automated voices and sympathetic but powerless representatives. They offered payment plans that were mathematically impossible. They suggested I apply for assistance programs that I magically did not qualify for because I supposedly made too much money before I became disabled. The system was a labyrinth designed to exhaust me into submission. Every piece of mail with a hospital logo became a trigger for panic. I would leave them unopened on the kitchen counter, a growing tower of impending doom. The reality of my situation set in quickly. I had to start rationing my medications. I would take a pill every other day instead of daily, gambling with my life to make the prescriptions last until the end of the month. The stress was unbearable. I could feel my blood pressure rising every time I opened the mail. My health, which was already fragile, began to deteriorate even further. The anxiety caused crippling insomnia. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, calculating how many months I had left before I lost my house, before I lost everything. The stress was doing more damage to my heart than the clogged arteries ever did. I was a prisoner of my own life, trapped by debt and failing health. And an unrationing medication is a terrifying game of Russian roulette. You cut pills in half. You skip days. You tell yourself that the faint fluttering in your chest is just imagination, not the inevitable result of missing your beta blockers. I researched natural remedies, desperately looking for a cheap alternative to the pharmaceuticals keeping me alive. I steeped garlic in hot water. I chewed on raw ginger. But none of it could replace the medical science I simply could no longer afford. I was deteriorating, and I knew it. The reflection in the mirror showed a man who was gray, exhausted, and profoundly defeated. I was waiting to die, and the worst part was that I felt like my death was going to be an administrative error, a failure to balance a ledger. In the darkest hours of my despair, I stumbled upon a video online about expatriates living in Southeast Asia. At first, I dismissed it as a fantasy for wealthy retirees, but the more I watched, the more I realized these were ordinary people, people like me, who had simply refused to accept the miserable hand they were dealt. That was when I discovered Vietnam. The algorithms must have noticed my desperation because they recommended a book that would fundamentally change my trajectory. The book is called You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker. If you are feeling trapped in your current life, I highly recommend checking it out. The link is in the comments. Reading that book felt like someone was finally speaking directly to my soul. Walker wrote about the illusions of security, the trap of endless consumption, and the courage required to step off the treadmill. He articulated every fear and frustration I was feeling. The book arrived on a rainy Tuesday. I sat in my quiet, gloomy house and read it cover to cover in one sitting. You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker was not just a book. It was an intervention. Walker dismantled the concept of geographic loyalty, arguing that remaining in a place that is destroying you is not noble, it is suicidal. He wrote about the courage to seek a geographic cure when the local environment is toxic. Every page felt like a revelation, a permission slip to stop suffering in silence. I highlighted passages until the marker ran dry. I dog-eared the pages. I realized that my loyalty to Columbus, Ohio, was a one-way street. The city, the system, the economy, they had no loyalty to me. If I died, I would be replaced. If I left, I might actually live. Ann and I started doing the math. My Social Security income was $1,040 per month, which I had to start taking early due to my sudden disability. In Columbus, Ohio, $1,040 barely covered my property, taxes, utilities, and groceries, let alone my towering medical debt and medications. But in Vietnam, $1,040 was enough to live comfortably, eat well, and most importantly, afford the health care I desperately needed. The numbers were undeniable. The logic was sound. But making the decision was the hardest thing I have ever done. Until the research phase became my new full-time job, I spent hours on internet forums reading the stories of expatriates in Southeast Asia. I learned about visa requirements, cost of living indexes, and expatriate health care. Vietnam kept rising to the top of the list. The combination of incredible affordability, a robust health care system accessible to foreigners, and a rich, deeply rooted culture was intoxicating. But it was Cantho that truly captured my imagination. The videos of the Mekong Delta, with its intricate network of rivers, the floating markets, and the emerald green rice paddies, promised a tranquility I had never known. I started learning a few basic phrases in Vietnamese. Hello? Thank you. How much is this? The mere act of planning the escape gave me a surge of energy I had not felt in years. Hun, when I told my family about my plan, the reactions were a mix of shock and concern. Linda, my ex-wife, thought I was having a mental breakdown. Patrick, who was busy building his own life in Columbus, begged me to reconsider, offering to help me navigate bankruptcy instead. Renee, living in Cincinnati, cried on the phone, terrified that I was moving to a developing country to die alone. It was agonizing to see the worry in their eyes, to hear the panic in their voices. But I knew that if I stayed in Ohio, the stress and the debt would put me in the ground within a year. I was choosing life, even if they could not understand it yet. I sold everything I owned, my house, my truck, my tools, my furniture. I paid off a fraction of what I owed the hospital and walked away from the rest. At 61 years old, I boarded a plane with 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket. And the day I left Ohio was a blur of emotion. My daughter, Renee, drove me to the airport, the silence in the car heavy with unspoken fears. When I hugged her goodbye at the security checkpoint, she clung to me, her tears soaking my collar. I promised her I would be careful, that I would call every day. But I know she thought she was saying goodbye to me forever. As the plane lifted off the runway, breaking through the gray Ohio clouds, I looked down at the sprawling grid of streets and highways that had defined my entire existence. I felt a profound sense of loss, yes, but also a thrilling, terrifying sense of liberation. I was a man with nothing left to lose, heading toward a horizon I could barely comprehend. And stepping out of the airport in Ho Chi Minh City was like walking into a wall of humidity and chaos. The noise, the traffic, the sheer volume of humanity was overwhelming, but I was not staying in the chaotic metropolis. My destination was Cantho, a city in the heart of the Mekong Delta. I wanted the river life, the slow pace, the affordable cost of living. When I arrived in Cantho, I knew I had found my sanctuary. The city is a vibrant tapestry of waterways, lush green fruit orchards, and bustling floating markets. Every morning the river comes alive with boats piled high with pineapples, watermelons, and mangoes, the vendors calling out their prices across the water. And the river itself became my daily meditation. Every morning before the heat of the day settled over the city, I would walk down to the water's edge. The Mekong is not just a body of water. It is a living, breathing entity that dictates the rhythm of life for millions. I would watch the small wooden boats glide past, their prows painted with protective eyes to ward off river spirits. The water, a rich, murky brown, carried the soil and life of half a continent. I found myself mesmerizingly drawn to its constant, unhurried flow. In Ohio, my life was a series of frantic dashes from one emergency to another, fixing broken furnaces in the dead of winter, always racing against the clock. Here, the river taught me that constant, steady movement achieves more than frantic rushing. It was a lesson my heart desperately needed to learn. An ounce living in Cantho is a sensory explosion. Every morning I am awakened not by the jarring blare of an alarm clock, but by the symphony of the river, the low hum of diesel engines on the cargo boats, the rhythmic splash of oars, the distant calls of vendors selling breakfast noodles from their small wooden vessels. I walked to the local market, a vibrant labyrinth of narrow alleys overflowing with life. The smell of lemongrass, garlic, and fish sauce permeates the air. There are mountains of fresh produce, vivid red chilies, deep purple eggplants, and herbs so fresh they look like they were pulled from the earth minutes ago. I watch the women expertly scale fish and butcher pork with cleavers, their hands moving with practiced rhythmic grace. It is a world entirely removed from the sterile, fluorescent-lit aisles of American supermarkets. And my financial breakdown here is completely transparent. I rent a beautiful, airy apartment with a balcony overlooking a quiet canal for $300 a month. My groceries, mostly fresh vegetables, fish, and tropical fruits from the local markets, cost me about $150 a month. Utilities, including high-speed internet to talk to my kids, run about $40. But the most miraculous part is the health care. When I first arrived, I was terrified of running out of my heart medication. I visited a local cardiologist, fully expecting a complicated and expensive ordeal. Instead, I saw a doctor within an hour, had a full examination, an electrocardiogram, and received a month's supply of my exact medications for less than $50 out of pocket. For the first time in years, I was seeing a doctor regularly. The crushing weight of $80,000 in medical debt simply vanished from my daily reality. I was no longer rationing my pills. I was no longer afraid of dying because I could not afford to live. Let me tell you more about the health care, because I know that is the primary concern for anyone my age considering this leap. When I walked into that hospital in Cantho, I brought all my American anxieties with me. I braced myself for the endless paperwork, the hidden fees, the administrative hostility. But what I experienced was profound efficiency and genuine care. The facility was modern and exceptionally clean. The doctor spoke excellent English and actually took the time to listen to my history. He did not rush me. He examined my previous records, asked detailed questions about my symptoms, and formulated a comprehensive care plan. When I went to the pharmacy counter and was handed my life-saving medication for the equivalent of a modest restaurant dinner back home, I literally broke down and wept. The pharmacist, a kind young woman, looked alarmed and offered me a tissue. How could I explain to her that she had just handed me my life back? None. The transformation of my health was profound, but the true turning point came about 2 weeks after I arrived. I remember it vividly. I was lying in my new bed, listening to the gentle hum of the ceiling fan and the distant rhythmic chugging of a riverboat engine. For years, my nights had been a battleground of anxiety and racing thoughts, but that night, the fear was gone, the financial terror was gone. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since the heart attack, I slept a full, uninterrupted 8 hours. When I woke up, the sunlight was streaming through the window, and I felt a sense of peace that brought tears to my eyes. My heart, both physically and emotionally, was finally resting. Then my diet completely changed, not out of discipline, but out of necessity and availability. Gone were the fast food burgers eaten in the driver's seat of my work van. Gone were the processed microwave meals that I used to numb my exhaustion. Instead, I discovered a world of flavors that were entirely new to me. I would buy dragon fruit, its vibrant pink skin hiding sweet speckled flesh, and pomelos as large as my head. I learned to eat veau for breakfast, the fragrant broth infused with star anise and cinnamon warming my stomach and soothing my soul, the abundance of fresh greens, herbs I could not even name, and lean fish from the Delta transformed my physical being. My blood pressure dropped. The chronic inflammation that had plagued my joints for a decade slowly subsided. It felt as though the very food of this land was slowly repairing the damage inflicted by my old life. The community in Cantho embraced me in a way I never expected. My neighbors, despite the language barrier, constantly bring me fresh fruit, bowls of steaming noodle soup, and warm smiles. We communicate through gestures, translation, applications on our phones, and the universal language of kindness. The slow pace of life along the Mekong River forced me to slow down too. I stopped rushing. I stopped worrying about what I was supposed to achieve. I began taking long walks along the riverbanks, watching the water hyacinths drift by, feeling the tension permanently leave my shoulders. I realized that wealth is not about how much money you have in the bank. Health is wealth. Time is wealth. Peace of mind is wealth. And the people of Cantho are the true heart of this experience. There is a deep cultural emphasis on community and respect for elders that is entirely absent in the hyper-individualistic society I left behind. I am known in my neighborhood as the friendly foreign uncle. The woman who runs the small coffee stall at the corner of my street knows exactly how I like my iced coffee, strong, with just a touch of condensed milk, and begins preparing it the moment she sees me walking down the block. Children wave and practice their English with me. When I was sick with a mild stomach bug during my first few months, my landlady noticed I had not left my apartment. She brought me a bowl of plain rice porridge with ginger and insisted on checking on me every few hours until I recovered. This level of spontaneous, uncompensated care from near strangers was entirely alien to me, yet it healed a profound loneliness I did not even realize I was carrying. Sometimes I think about the man I was before the heart attack. I picture him hunched over a steering wheel, jaw clenched, calculating how many hours of overtime he needed to pay the winter heating bill. I want to reach back through time and shake him to tell him that none of it is worth his life, The irony is that in my quest to provide security for myself and my family, I had sacrificed the very vessel required to enjoy it. We are taught that hard work is the ultimate virtue, but we are rarely warned about the point where hard work becomes self-destruction. In Vietnam, I witnessed a different kind of industry. The people here work incredibly hard, often from before dawn until after dusk, but there is a fluidity to it. There is time built in for resting in a hammock, for sharing a pot of strong, sweet coffee with a neighbor, for laughing at a joke. They understand that work is a part of life, not the entirety of it. Now, of course, it was not always easy. The transition had its difficulties. The tropical heat can be oppressive, thick and heavy, forcing me to adapt my routine to the cooler hours of early morning and late evening. The language, with its complex tones, remains a constant challenge. I often stumble over basic phrases, accidentally ordering the wrong food or confusing a taxi driver. There are moments of profound homesickness, moments when I miss the crisp autumn air of Ohio, the familiar streets of my hometown, and most of all, the physical presence of my children. The difficulties are real, and I will not romanticize them. There are days when the heat is so intense it feels like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. During these times, I retreat to the air-conditioned sanctuary of my bedroom, reading or napping until the sun begins to set. The language barrier can be exhausting, even after months of studying. The tonal nature of Vietnamese means that a slight mispronunciation can completely change the meaning of a word. I have accidentally ordered iced tea when I wanted soup, and I have caused uproarious laughter by mispronouncing a simple greeting. There is a steep learning curve to navigating the local bureaucracy, renewing visas, and understanding the unspoken rules of traffic and commerce. But these challenges are manageable. They are the friction of living, not the suffocating pressure of impending doom that I experienced in Ohio. And see, the financial freedom I found here is difficult to explain to someone who has spent their entire life trapped in the American economic machine. When you remove the constant low-level panic of impending bankruptcy, your mind expands. For the first time in my adult life, I had the mental bandwidth to pursue interests outside of survival. I started reading books again. I bought a small, cheap guitar and began teaching myself to play, my clumsy, calloused fingers slowly learning the chords. I spent hours sitting in local cafes, sipping iced coffee dripping over condensed milk, simply observing the flow of humanity. I realized that my previous existence was not living, it was merely subsisting. Here, with my $1,040 a month, I was wealthy in the truest sense of the word. I had agency. I had time, and none but technology bridges the gap. I have weekly video calls with Patrick and Renee. At first, they were still anxious, scrutinizing my face for signs of illness or regret. But as the months passed, they saw the change in me. They saw the color return to my cheeks, the weight I had lost naturally from eating fresh food and walking everywhere, the genuine smile that had replaced my perpetual grimace. Renee recently told me that I looked 10 years younger than I did the night of the heart attack. They understand now. They see that this was not a reckless escape, but a desperate and successful bid for survival. My relationship with my children has actually improved since I moved halfway across the world. When I lived in Columbus, our interactions were often burdened by their worry for my health and my financial state. I was the struggling father they felt obligated to save. Now, when we speak on video calls, I am a source of fascinating stories. I show them the view from my balcony. I introduce them to my neighbors who wander into the frame. Patrick is even planning to visit me next year, bringing his wife to see the Mekong Delta for themselves. They see that I am not just surviving, I am flourishing. The distance has removed the anxiety, allowing us to connect simply as adults who care about one another. And even the rain here is different. In Ohio, rain was an annoyance, a cold, gray drizzle that made my joints ache and my job more difficult. In the Mekong Delta, the rain is an event. During the monsoon season, the sky turns a deep bruised purple and the air grows thick with anticipation. When the rain finally falls, it is a torrential, roaring deluge that washes the world clean. It demands your attention. I love sitting on my balcony during these downpours, listening to the deafening roar of water hitting the corrugated metal roofs, feeling the sudden, blessed drop in temperature. It feels cleansing. It feels as though the sky is washing away the dust of the old world, leaving everything fresh and renewed in its wake. It is in these moments, surrounded by the raw power of nature, that I feel most deeply grateful for my second chance at life. Nan, I often revisit the words that pushed me to make this leap. As it says in You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker, the hardest prison to escape is the one you do not know you are in. I had been living in a prison of debt, stress, and societal expectations for decades. I thought I was doing the right thing, playing by the rules, working hard, and paying my dues. But the rules were rigged. The system was designed to keep me running on that treadmill until I collapsed. Breaking free required a radical shift in perspective, a willingness to abandon everything I knew and step into the unknown. And I keep a copy of You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker on the small bamboo table next to my reading chair. I find myself returning to it whenever the ghost of my old anxieties tries to creep back in. Walker writes that the ultimate freedom is the realization that your environment is a choice, not a life sentence. We are conditioned to believe that our hometown, our country, our economic system are the absolute boundaries of our reality. We are taught to endure, to suffer quietly, and to hope that hard work will eventually be rewarded. But the reward rarely comes for men like me. I had to reject the entire premise. I had to recognize that the borders of my life were imaginary, enforced only by my own fear. Reading that book gave me the vocabulary to understand my dissatisfaction and the blueprint to escape it. To anyone watching this, anyone who is feeling crushed by debt, suffocated by stress, or terrified of a failing body, I want you to hear me clearly. You have options. The life you are living right now is not the only life available to you. You do not have to accept a slow decline. You do not have to let medical debt dictate your future or stress destroy your heart. The world is vastly larger and far more forgiving than the narrow corridor we are taught to walk down. It takes courage to change course, and it is terrifying to leave behind the familiar, even when the familiar is killing you. But on the other side of that, fear is a life of dignity, peace, and restored health. Antonays, the sun sets over Cantho, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange, pink, and violet. I sit on my balcony and listen to the evening sounds of the river. The heat breaks, the air cools, and the city transitions into the vibrant, communal life of the night. I touch the hospital bracelet in my wallet. the cheap plastic band that marks the dividing line between my old life and my new one, I think of the $80,000 in medical debt that used to keep me awake, paralyzed with fear. That debt belongs to a ghost now. The man who owed that money died in a hospital bed in Ohio. The man who survived lives here, by the river, free from the crushing weight of a system that tried to break him. And I am Walter Beaumont, and I am thriving in Cantho, Vietnam. My heart is beating strong, my debts no longer control me, and my days are my own. If my story resonates with you, I urge you to take that first step. Read You Were Never Meant to Stay by Alan Walker. Start researching your options, and remember that your health is your most precious asset. Do not wait for a monitor beside a hospital bed to show you how fragile your life is. Take control now. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you all the courage in the world on your own journey to healing. Nananin. And every single day in Vietnam is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the body's incredible capacity to heal when it is removed from a toxic environment. I walk miles every day, my legs strong, my breathing deep and steady. I no longer feel the tightness in my chest. My mind is sharp, no longer clouded by the fog of chronic exhaustion and financial panic. I'm learning a new language, exploring a vibrant culture, and making friends who value my presence rather than my productivity. I have discovered that aging does not have to be a slow, painful decline into poverty and illness. It can be a glorious, defiant reinvention. It can be the most beautiful chapter of the entire story. Then, so if you are sitting in a recliner right now, massaging a sore shoulder, worrying about how you will pay for your next prescription, I am speaking directly to you. Look beyond the borders of your immediate reality. The world is full of places where you can live with dignity, where your health is prioritized, and where a modest income is enough to provide a beautiful, fulfilling life. It requires a leap of faith, absolutely. It requires leaving behind the familiar and stepping into the unknown. But the alternative is to remain in the burning house, hoping the fire will suddenly put itself out. Do not wait for the heart attack. Do not wait for the crushing mountain of debt. Take your life back into your own hands. You have the power to write a new ending to your story.